God, was it? Oh my God, I remember this. We had Corey.
Yeah, Corey.
We're going that way?
Your next Jason and then me. Hamlet from
Shiny.
I thought it was going to be on the bench first.
Oh my God. Wait, this is...
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Are you going to take off your lanyard or no?
Oh, it says ASCAP. So nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too.
How dare you, sir?
Should I scoot down?
No one puts face in a corner.
You're next to me.
I don't know how this works. We're in order. I'm just gonna get really comfortable.
Oh, yeah. He's
Tell me, why are you over there? You should be over here.
Did we do it wrong?
I feel very far away from everyone. I just I'm gonna lean in.
Yeah.
I really hope that they've got like at least some kind of speaker playing back because I cannot actually hear you over here.
Well, we're gonna be talking. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying I'm hoping that there's like a talk back, like a monitor that actually is pointing towards us.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah.
Well, I thought about just taking off my glasses.
Perfect. So you really can't have any.
Glasses.
You take them off. I'll put yours on.
I would also
Neither
do
of us
that.
can see.
Support, to support you. Solidarity.
Blind myself too.
Mm-hmm.
Are they?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Oh, they are.
It's a big crowd. Big crowd. Gonna have a lot of one-on-one time. And are we competing with lunch right now? Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
In the battle of lunch versus video games, lunch wins again. That's great.
What's like if you were talking with a game or something, what's like one game you miss? Well, I don't know. I won the award for.
I mean, they got acquired by
soundtrack for Brown. I was nominated for
they're sort of like
typically. Yeah, I'm not a gamer, so I don't. Yeah, yeah.
Call of Duty or something.
No, but those games are like, if you're getting a why spend your money on something if they do well?
Yeah, I negotiated that more than typically it's not that much.
I don't know. I think I need to get like a green light from Morgan or somebody. I don't know. I'm gonna say something really loud into the mic to try and get people to come in from the hallway. It's like I guess no one cares about making money from video games, you know?
Yeah.
And to say be really passive aggressive. Anyone in the room will get my personal social security number, you know? No, I'll do it. I got it. I don't know who's going to tell me to start. I don't. I should have brought some like holding music, you know. Do you have a meeting in San Diego, or you just? Yeah. What kind of? What, do you have like a car that'll drive itself? Hopefully. No.
No, old like a BMW.
Oh, well, at least the drive will be nice. Inside. You'll probably just be able to look at the beach and Oceanside for 3 hours while you're stuck on the highway.
The crazy thing is, my friends are just like, you need to know, you really know.
Oh, nice.
So they're already doing that last night. So
All right. Doing their thing.
driving down on this
You're like, well, I'm
4 or 5.
speaking to a room of 30 people. I'm gonna go see.
They're gonna come back and like, we're actually gonna wait till after everyone's done eating. They're just waiting for us.
Hey, all right, okay, cool. I'm gonna make noise so people come in from lunch, because I guess nobody wants to make money from video games. All right, not a single
But
laugh. Yeah, all right, cool. Well, thanks to those of you who decided to ditch the churros and the nacho cart and join us to talk about video games. You know, all things considered, games don't make that much money, just like, you know, the NFL plus TV plus feature films combined, then tripled, then doubled again. So, you know, on track for $180 billion this year. It comes to, yeah, it's crazy. It's a lot of money. When it comes to licensing music into games, it is a virtually untapped market for many different reasons. For a lot of the different pillars of rights management and negotiation and creative and technical are all very different. So that's what we are here today. We pulled together a panel of some very intelligent, very smart, with an asterisk, that's for myself, panelists who have, you know, very different expertises and backgrounds, but they're all utmost professional and experienced in their fields. So I will kind of go down the row here and let everyone introduce themselves briefly, a couple of sentences. Introduce yourself, what you do, and your experience in your field with games.
I'm Corey Shackelford. I'm a music attorney. Have my own practice representing music creators and music rights owners. In the video game world, I work with a lot of video game, film, TV composers, negotiating their composer deals with the various publishers, developers, studios. I also work with an outside general counsel and handle the business and legal affairs for a pretty well-known independent music publishing company here in the United States. So license a lot of popular music to the games that license popular music, like FIFA or Madden, Grand Theft Auto, stuff like that. And then I work with an independent game developer and help them clear like really obscure tracks for some of their games. So.
I'm Chase Bethia, a professional video game composer, independent. I've been working in the industry for 11 years. I've shipped about 21 games in that time. I'm best known for the work on the music for Ground. Has about 3 million players worldwide. Also was nominated for the score for I Can't Escape Darkness and VGMO. I do a lot of technical audio design with the middleware Elias, which is part of the implementation into games, so I'm very passionate about that. But I've been playing games since I was scoring game music on Game Boy Camera, which is technically the first selfie, if you're familiar.
Hi, I'm Jen Harmon, and I work at ASCAP. I work on the membership team for film and TV and all visual media, where we take care of our composers. And some of the lovely people on this panel are people that I help out and make sure that they get paid for their projects.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mason Lieberman. I am the senior composer and audio supervisor for Tencent, where I deal with games like Apex Legends Mobile, Teamfight Tactics, Battle for the Golden Spatula, PUBG Mobile, Game for Peace, and just a bucket load of others. I come from the anime music world originally, which is actually not totally dissimilar to production music. There's a lot of crossover there. And I've gotten to work with a lot of really exciting IP over the years, especially through Tencent, with some of my favorite projects to be been involved with, including Spider-Man, Arcane, Pokemon, Ruby, Beyblade, on and on and on.
Hi, I'm Bobby Tahuri. I'm a composer. In the video game world, I've done 2 AAA titles, Rise of the Tomb Raider and Marvel's Avengers, and I have experience in the production music world as well. I have a lot of music in libraries too, so it's nice to be here and kind of try to talk about both.
Awesome.
Both worlds.
Thanks, everyone. And my name is Cody Matthew Johnson. I'm your moderator. That's why I'm kind of separated from them, I guess. They're so far away, yet so close. And I have been a composer for a long time, and then in the last few years, I started an interactive audio solutions company called Imperia Sound and Music that has since developed into more of an audio conglomerate where I'm the creative director, audio director, and I do some composing still. You know, label owners out there will get it. You start somewhere and you end up another way and you just accept it. So we have a pretty wide expertise here. And so my hope is that we will go through some different pillars that differentiate between linear and interactive media. And everyone can share their experience and open in dialogue, and then we'll save some time at the end for questions, so we can have some more maybe targeted questions to open the hood behind a singular topic that you might have found interesting that applies to you. So before we get started, I do like to do a bit of kind of an audience composition poll. So how many are composers? Okay, a good amount, that's good. How many are label owners or publishers, sub-pubs, any rights management? Okay. So I'd say there's some hesitant hands, you know, they don't want to give themselves away, but I would say it's about 50-50. Anyone else that lands outside of those two that's here today? Okay, that's it. Right down the middle, great. Love that, makes it easy. Then we'll just kind of jump right into some conversation here. And right off the bat, we kind of want to just crack open the egg and talk about the differences between linear and interactive media for each person. And so maybe we can make this a rather quick bullet point, so we kind of have a touch point between all the expertises, and then we can go from there. So Corey, why don't you go ahead and start?
I think we should start down that way.
We're going to start with Bobby, the other
it's
side.
It's kind of weird. The business and legal. Sorry, the business and legal is like not as exciting as some of the creative aspects of it. So.
Well, I personally don't see a difference between linear and interactive. When I'm composing music, there's parameters that you have to work under. You're given a brief. In games, you're given a brief. You're given gameplay, sometimes cinematics, which is linear, and then oftentimes loop-based, the interactive gameplay part. But I don't treat them any differently. I just try to respond viscerally to what's going on in the game and try to help the story along. And sure, you have to be aware of looping and making sure your music is interesting and doesn't bore the player to tears. But what's nice is that when in games, there's a team audio director who can help you with all your stems and trigger music when it's necessary. And you can just write beds underneath whatever's happening in the gameplay. So, but I don't treat them any differently when I'm composing.
So, as someone who is basically an audio director who does a lot of that exact type of stuff, to me the funny thing is, in the ways where it matters, they're the exact same thing. At the end of the day, you're creating music or you're licensing music for a narrative, for a story, for a world, for an experience that you're trying to impart onto your end user, on your players. You're trying to expand their sense of personal agency and connection to a story so that they feel a certain way, hopefully so that they'll give you some money and let you keep doing the thing and keep having fun. But on the actual micro level of dealing with music and video games, many things are very different as far as this idea that, you know, if I were scoring a movie or whatever, and it's like a horror movie or something, I know that every single time, 60 minutes in, you know, 10 seconds in, 2 frames in, the monster appears on screen, it's gonna be a big roar, and I'm gonna need some kind of big duh kind of sound to like really score that moment. And every single person who watches that movie experiences it the same way. With a video game, I don't really know where you're gonna be 1 hour in. Everyone's gonna be in a different place, you might be doing different things. And so what we're really doing, what your job is you're creating an interactive web of music that bridges the gap from scene to scene, from world to world, from area to area, that we can seamlessly go from place to place without you realizing that your experience is being custom scored in that moment in real time, which is just a really interesting mathematics problem to solve sometimes.
So from our perspective, it's all the same. It's valuable IP, and we value all the music equally, whether it's video game, film and TV, radio, and you should be registering your works and documenting all of your placements in a productive way.
Yeah, so Mason said a bunch of it, but it's, you're understanding where, if you're in a linear format, where you can see the beginning, the middle, and the end. And so something that I specialize in, which is dynamic and interactive, it is about the ambiguity and the unknown of where things are going to go. And I think that's what's most exciting, in at least my mind, to just have the sense of, okay, well, I think most of us can actually relate to this. We have a bunch of ideas, and we want to put all those ideas down at one point, but we don't use all those ideas. And in that respect, that's where those pieces come together, because then you can utilize that to fill in the webs accordingly.
From my perspective, I think we're going to get into some of the contract stuff later. But working with a composer who's composing a film or TV show compared to a video game, it's I think a big thing is the commitment and the amount of music you're creating. And a composer might come to me and say, "Hey, I'm doing this film. I'm going to be on the project for like 2 months." Mm-hmm. And then another time, a composer might come in and be like, "Hey, I'm doing this game. It's probably going to be released in a couple years." And they'll work for a couple months and then go do a film and then come back and work on the game. So I think there's a little bit from the business side of kind of like figuring out how you're gonna do this video game, and the video game's probably not gonna be able to sustain you, financially. So like, how am I gonna fit in the different films which are gonna require first priority? And so there's a little bit of that on the business end that I see, but from my perspective, it's just the contracts are somewhat similar, but yeah.
It's worth mentioning too that I think Bobby and Mason, Chase very directly addressed it. This step of technology of middleware, which something the creatives on the panel here are very familiar with, where we're talking about a piece of software that goes between the music, the creative, and the game development engine that exports code. And that, I think we can agree that software, and that middleware specifically, is becoming more ubiquitous and almost encouraged or required for music creatives or people who are editing, handling music to be working with. And I think that is one of the largest differentiating factors. I see a lot of head nods, I'm just getting positive feedback. That's great.
You're right. It's an essential part of the process, and I think that if you're hoping to get your music into games, one of the first things you need to understand is how games are made. Like, it's kind of the classic, well, if you want your music in film, do you watch film? Do you know what's popular? Do you know what the aesthetic is? Like, what kind of things are you making? Same exact thing with video games. So if you don't know how music operates in a game, and you have no context of what that process looks like, what those technical requirements are, it's going to be really hard for you to create music that you're hoping to license or sell to video game developers if it does not otherwise meet any of the technical or emotional requirements of things that are currently in the video game scene.
Right, and I think Chase can speak to this too before we get into some of the money stuff, is that it's important to have a holistic approach, right? Chase, how important is it for you to have like a roadmap to the interactivity before you put pen to paper?
It's extremely imperative. It's about being as perspicacious as you possibly could be. And for me personally, it's come down to a point where I use index cards now, before I even probably write any type of typical music, because the design itself is beyond the music, at least for me, like I said, but I've been playing Game Boy games all my life, so you've got to start somewhere. But learning the limitations is really what gets you to understand what the design is going to be formed. And it's paramount, because then you're not just serving the team of developers, you're serving the game. And the game is going to tell you, this is what we feel, this is how it should flow, and it has a pulse. And so it is all encompassed together to understand, before you write a piece of music, where your roadmap is never going to be clear, but you at least have some kind of compass that you set for yourself.
Excellent. So we all know how to make money from production music. We know where that money comes from, whether it's synchronization, royalties, if it's ancillary usages, if it's marketing, if it's inside of a TV show, if it's a trailer, performance royalties, obviously. Jen, I'm going to toss this over to you pretty quickly here. And so the main question here is, and what I want everyone to really think about, is how is this different in games? How does the medium differ enough that we need to approach the revenue opportunities either differently, the same, or maybe with a different frame of mind and thinking? So if anyone wants to jump in before Jen, I know that's a very Jen-loaded question.
I can throw in one thing to kind of set you up or tee you up for success. Well, something that's a big difference between video games and things like film or TV, back-end royalties, and what things do, or more specifically don't, generate a royalty. Which I think is potentially a great spot to bring in you for ASCAP side. Or I can say more if you want.
You can continue your thought.
Well, maybe we can get into, so let me just add, if you're licensing music in a video game or a film, it's pretty similar. There's the acquisition fee, whether it's a sync license or you're paying a composer fee. And then in addition to that, there's performance royalties for the composition, which you would receive from PRO. And then, potentially for film, TV, there's going to be broadcast mechanical royalties or neighboring rights royalties for the sound recording. And it's, for video games, it's the same, it's somewhat. There's the acquisition, if it's a sync license fee or you're paying a composer, and there's potential performance royalties, which she will get into. The thing about video games is just, the film and TV has been around for a lot longer than video games, so a lot of these additional royalty streams haven't been set up yet and negotiated, and the law hasn't really caught up with it yet. But yeah, I think in the future there'll be very similar, I would think, film, TV, and video games, but a little bit different right now.
Yeah, domestically, what we're looking at is anything that's streaming is a licensable source of revenue for our members. And we have a growing list of services that are available that either are streaming games directly, or it's game music, game content that's being shared. And those are all new and growing, and we're really excited about the growth potential there. But one of the best stories for this field is that there's already substantial royalties coming out of Europe. So I heard a mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can feel the stage shake with approving nods.
We have a lot of happy composers out there. There is a license for PlayStation online stores in the EU, and a portion of the sales from those online stores is designated as a performance royalty. And so yes.
Thank you.
So for many years now, we've been distributing significant amounts of money to our composers for their games. And that's been a beautiful find for the community, because most of these composers walked into their contracts not expecting this line of revenue at the time. So it's newly found money, and it's lovely windfalls when they do come.
Yeah.
So that's been a bright spot for a lot of people.
Oh, sorry, Chase, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add. So I'm actually right in the middle of this whole thing you're speaking about, and so I negotiated a contract for an independent game, whereas the developer was so lazy, didn't want to put it on the console, and we did multiple games for many years. We missed out on an opportunity for PlayStation VR, just because of just 100-page contract of just things that were just too much for them and overwhelming. So in this one, I had said, hey, well, and it's kind of a risk. I said, I'm not scoring this game unless you're going to put it on the console. And for some reason, I just had this instinct that eventually, we were talking about Corey, that we're going to catch up. And so in 2015, I was thinking, I think this is going to change in some way. And that's why I was so excited when you said, over in the EU. Now, mind you, how hard is it to get one thing, at least a game out is a miracle, and then get it out on consoles, another miracle, and then get it performance royalties is 3 miracles, is lightning striking right now. So it's kind of wild stars. So yeah, I just want to say it is happening, and it is possible, and it's very exciting.
Jen, is there, for the label owners or composers in the audience who might have their music in games who haven't seen any performance royalties, what path do they have to take? Are there limitations to maybe what years that games were sold on the PlayStation Store? Can you shed some light on the parameters that maybe they can look at as they move forward?
Sure. So baseline, you need to register your works. They need to be thoroughly registered, complete registrations. We need writers, we need publishers, we need ISWCs assigned. Otherwise, PRS will not process it. PRS is administering this license for those EU stores. Now I just lost my train of thought. I got all excited about title registrations.
Then Q sheet, right?
The parameters for it, it's a really slow process. So this has been going on for, I think, since 2017, at least, and some trickle through earlier than that. And it's every 2 years that they're doing a push through of the data. And right now they're working on a 2020 to 2021 time period for processing later this year that would then come out to members in 2023. So there's a lag time. They're getting faster. When it initially started to get processed, I think it was a 7-year period that they crunched through in one distribution, and then it's been 2 years at a time. They do not go backwards, so you make your claim and then you move on. But it's an ever-growing list of games that are available on those services, and continuing royalties.
Bobby was going to.
And Jen, yeah, I was going to say Q sheets. I know it's basically, it's a little different than film and TV, but it's basically the same thing, like it's a spreadsheet of the amount of music in the game and the title. But things like usage codes, is that still important in a game, or?
Yeah, I mean, specifically for PRS, they're categorizing everything as background or feature.
Right. Okay.
So But essentially, looking at the actual distributions, it looks like it's being equally split across the works. So it's a list of works that are in the game.
Yeah.
And that's the core of it, but it's essentially a cue sheet, and you can have it more detailed if you'd like it to be, but
And
if you're the sole composer, you could boil it down to one individual work and say, Rise of the Tomb Raider.
180 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
I'll just add, we're just talking about music in the games. We all know music can live outside of games, and video game soundtracks are very popular. And if your music is being streamed on Pandora or Spotify or YouTube, there's a performance element there as well. So it's not just these performance royalties from Europe. It's very important that you are registering your works with the MLC and ASCAP, or whatever your PRO is, because there's performance royalties coming from other places as well.
Yeah, and making sure your work registrations are matching to those listings so that things can match up readily.
Yeah.
Those are all important steps to take, which I think this audience knows, but it's something we always like to mention.
we all love metadata here.
We all love metadata on this panel. Can you
Yeah.
tell?
I do, it's worth mentioning too, as kind of a stepping stone off that. Jen started alluding to this about, we know how performance rights organizations, they'll weight certain pieces depending on what their usages are. We're paid per second, per minute, and then there's premium credits on top of that. That doesn't really apply in games. And so this goes out to the creatives here as well. And, how are we compensated on the front end? Do we get, Chase laughs. Do we get, I guess it's kind of a loaded question, but everyone's experience is a little different.
What do you get paid, Chase?
Yeah, our upfront,
Compensation? What?
our
What is that?
upfront fees more? Are there other opportunities to negotiate, whether it's sales milestones, if we're getting net profit on game sales? What other ways are there for us to exploit, in the most positive use of that term possible, our works if this is a new market? How do we find other ways, and what are those other ways to be compensated?
Yeah, so personally for me, it's that whole song and dance of what is your budget? And to a certain point, you get tired of dancing. So you set down your worth first, and I think this is important because then it's all, a race to the bottom. So set your worth at least high. And then the compensation for upfront things, they vary. It depends on the mindset of the developer. It really isn't about, I'm changing the dynamic and the tone of this because it's important to explain that it is the mindset of the developer who runs the company to decide the value of the worth of the music first and foremost. That's just the reality of it. So if they don't want to pay you anything for your music because they can get it off Audio Jungle, they're going to do it. So that's why I said set the value pretty high, and so that we can all thrive and grow. A rising tide lifts all ships. And so from there, the compensation is anywhere from usually a half up front, and then there's if the team is more than 10, you can do a 10%, if it's more than 10, you're probably not going to get more than 10%. But if it's smaller, you can get like 20% on the revenue share back end, or more. It depends on how much they value your work. And then from there, like I said, in my contract, I have something whereas I'm getting a royalty from the console. Now, it was kind of brilliant of me because I didn't know that was going to happen, and on another level of getting more outside of that. But I actually take it a step further. So I keep all my rights because I don't work on a lot of AAA games. A lot of AAA games are work for hire. And so you lose those rights. But I've out of the 21 games I've shipped, I've released about 12 soundtracks. I own almost all the rights for out of the 12. So I get to perform those live now and do live performances. So that's another expectation that I've been entertaining. I just had a performance at MagWest with the virtual video game orchestra and other places. So you get performance royalties through that. Then there's the back end if you get that. But it's just, it really, like I said, it comes back to the mindset of the developer. If they don't want to pay you for something, you're going to have wiggle rooms, and maybe you not have any wiggle room whatsoever.
To talk a little bit about some of the ways that you can potentially negotiate additional fee, obviously with video game music, oftentimes a lot of what you're really fighting for is on the upfront side. It's the flat X dollars per minute plus X production budget, you know, whatever it is that you're going to end up. And on a lot of projects, that is the vast majority of what it is, especially on the AAA side where potentially a lot of this stuff is work for hire and you may not have a ton of ways to potentially exploit it after a certain point. However, that doesn't mean that you never do, and it doesn't mean that there aren't other things that are on the table. At the end of the day, and I think that Corey would probably back me up on this,
Don't do it.
that I would say that the real ceiling is whatever you can negotiate, because everything is always on the table every single time if you have the leverage to go for it. You know, I've seen in situations where composers did games for nothing up front. They completely did it without any money, but in exchange, they were taking ownership of part of the game for something that was an incredibly valuable project because they believed in it and they knew it would be really worth their time in that way. I've seen situations where people are licensing their music and licensing their image and things like that, and in exchange for that, they're getting, you know, a royalty on sale of like in-game virtual items or skins or things like that, where maybe they've licensed their music to a game and when that soundtrack pack sells, they get a royalty on that. I've seen, you know, there are a million ways that you can kind of break this particular egg, so to speak.
Right.
I'll just add, it's awesome when you have a company or someone from a company that's willing to share some of those secrets. Or they're not secrets, but you know, it's nice.
Is this going on YouTube?
That there's
No.
I was just, you know, it's good to pick someone's brain like that and to know what's out there. And I just want to add, for some of you composers who are maybe working in film and TV and you're wondering how to get into video games, it's good to know. And I was going to say the same thing. So he's not sharing anything that, you know, he couldn't share. But
Of course not.
There's a lot more room for negotiation, I found, in video games than film and TV, especially if you're working with major studios. Indie film, you know, there's opportunities to retain ownership. But yeah, in the video game world, it's especially in the indie games and even AAA games, there's more room to negotiate unique revenue opportunities, and it could be life-changing money. You know, I worked with composers who do an indie video game and get paid, you know, a small fee up front, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, but they get a piece of the net profits of the game. The indie game blows up, and you know, life-changing money.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's an interesting space. I think video game composers, and especially in the indie video game world, it's a lot of opportunity there.
So it's a good natural segue to talk about music rights management. Chase, you started talking about this a little bit because as an independent or a composer that does a lot of work for independent video games, you retain your rights, therefore you manage your own rights. And he's talking about, and just kind of word vomiting what Chase had said of, you know, he's doing concerts, he's doing soundtracks, he owns all the material. There are some delicate issues when it comes to music rights management, specifically in video games. Mm-hmm. I'm specifically talking about
Twitch.
DMCAs. I'm talking about Twitch or user-generated content. I mean, I'll pass it down to Bobby for a second. You just got off of the Avengers game, one of the largest games of last year.
Yeah.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Very cool score. When you're working on a AAA video game, how are publishers working with music rights management? Are they doing content ID? Are they policing Twitch? How are they interacting with the music, with their audience?
These are great questions, and I wish I knew the answer. No, but I think, like with Marvel's Avengers, that's handled. Even the Crystal Dynamics was the company that released the game. The music is owned by Disney,
Right.
so it's up to them to put it into the system and hopefully exploit the music if there's possible ways to do so. So, you know, it's such a huge company, I just kind of let that go and just hope that something will happen. You know, I was just grateful to be on writing for the game and, you know, and that was a great experience in and of itself. But going back to additional sources of revenue, or just it was a work for hire for me, as most AAA titles are. But also there were opportunities to write additional music for trailers for the game, and that's a separate fee, which is nice.
Right.
And that comes from the marketing side or the branding side. And so yeah, so that's always good if you can, you know, in addition to the fee, creative fee, you can try to, write trailers. But at the same time, I know that it'd be nice for people here who have their music in libraries to also be able to give an opportunities to license their tracks for trailers. That happens as well. Like for Rise of the Tomb Raider, I think there was a Brand X library track that was for the release trailer for that, which was awesome. So it's like there's opportunities for especially in the trailer space.
Something that you actually just touched on that I just want to make sure to point out as the in-house guy. A lot of companies, this isn't like a hard rule, but it is something that could potentially help you target some of your goals if you're trying to get your tracks into things. Things like trailers often are coming from a marketing budget. They're not coming from the audio budget necessarily, or aren't coming from, say, the audio director. So if you're trying to get your music into the game, like, you know, in-game play, over the end credits, whatever it is, you're probably looking for like a music supervisor or an audio director or a head of music or something like that. And if you're trying to get into trailers, again, not everywhere, but in many cases, you might be looking for someone in the marketing department. You might be looking for someone who may not even have the term music supervisor in their title role. I know that for me, for dealing with like the 10-cent side of things, I have separate budgets that I consider for what's going in game versus what's going to go into like trailers or into cinematics released for social media or into obviously marketing material and so on. And that can actually be really helpful for me as like a music supervisor or what have you, because there are sometimes cases where, you know, maybe I want to do something with a specific artist, I want to collaborate with a specific project or whatever, but the budget just isn't there for me to make it happen from audio. But maybe I can call in a favor, or I can call in something, get it to happen over on the marketing side, and then we can negotiate terms that would allow me to also use it in-game or something to that effect, and all of a sudden, you know, you went one way and you got in the other too.
That's the ancillary usages opportunities in games have great potential, and I think we're seeing a lot more crossover. We're running slow on time. I do want to talk about the DMCA, and then we'll open up for Q&A. But we're running into more opportunities in the future too, where you see kind of ancillary extensions of intellectual properties of games going into linear media. I know, Mason, we were talking in the green room about how Tencent takes IP and licenses the IP from a TV show or an anime and makes a game out of it.
Yeah, we have, you know, we'll be doing a game like PUBG Mobile or whatever, and Spider-Man No Way Home is coming out. And so, like, a Disney will come to us and say, we want Spider-Man in your game, let's make it work. And that'll end up being, you know, often a combination of both licensed music and custom music that we will be hiring composers to put together. You know, I remember with that particular project, for example, we had both access to the Michael Giacchino No Way Home themes, and we had custom stuff that we had built, both based on those themes and based on our own original themes, that we worked with Disney to make sure that the quality and standard was correct and that it was true to the brand and so on. And that can be a great opportunity of additional work as well, potentially, because sometimes you end up on an IP collaboration where you scored the original thing, and so they just ask you to come back and do more stuff because you happen to be involved the first time, or because you have a history with that particular character or brand, even though it's not the same project and it's totally different people.
That's great. I do want to share specifically about Content ID and DMCA takedowns that is very relevant to music licensing. We all know we're trying to find as many ways to exploit our music and our license and collect as many royalty opportunities as we can. And a big way of doing that is through Content ID. With video game music and with video games at large, and I think we can all agree here, both in-house, creatively, video game developers sell games. And the best way to get their games in front of people is through fans interacting with the content, specifically on places like Twitch or YouTube or other streaming opportunities. If works are registered with Content ID, takedowns will be issued fervently. And so that stops the opportunity of organic marketing from a video game developer or a publisher's point of view. Oftentimes, that's why works are made for the game and licensed, or they're bought out, or they hire an artist or a production company or a team to create custom works for the game because they can decide how they manage those rights. A lot of the music we have in our catalogs is already registered with Content ID or has been, created as user-generated content, other forms of flagging this media to track its usages, which immediately impedes the progress of organic marketing for video game developers and publishers. So as you go out into the world and talk with devs and pubs, you need to keep that in mind, that your approach to music right management needs to adapt so it doesn't impede the systems they have in place to do the thing they do, which is sell games. And we're just trying to be a small part of that. Corey?
I'll plug Orpheum here. I was doing a demo with them earlier, at least on the popular music side. And maybe some of you guys that have catalogs here, you don't want to necessarily mess with Content ID if you're making, a bunch of money on people using your music in their YouTube videos. You don't necessarily want to take your music out of Content ID. And, a popular song by a popular artist, they're not going to, whitelist everything on YouTube because it's in a video game. But Orpheum was showing me some stuff, and this has always been like a struggle, I think, in the video game industry. These takedowns on Let's Play videos, and it's something that composers I work with are always trying to like figure out how they can get around this. But so Orpheum was showing me something that you can use keywords now, and instead of just saying, okay, this music's whitelisted, everything up on YouTube is nothing's going to get claimed. You can, anything that has the video game title in the title of the video will be whitelisted. Nice. So there's companies that are trying to figure out this process, and I'm seeing it when licensing popular music. More and more, they're wanting to have certain videos whitelisted, or if they're doing a Fortnite concert or something, they want to make sure that there's not going to be any takedowns or anything like that. So, yeah, there's cool companies that are trying to figure this out.
It's amazing. So I guess we do have some time left, so I'll open, unless anyone has final remarks, final comments. Anyone want to do a musical number? We could start our a cappella quintet. I'll just conduct. Anything? No, we're good. Well, then we'll open the
go to questions.
What's that? What? Who's talking to me? Did you say something? We got a question in the back. All right, let's do it. Yep, I see a hand. That's you, with the shirt.
Sorry, did you guys hear me at all?
Yeah, I heard you. I think
right,
your question was, with the background of the video game changing, how do you ensure that the texture and the timbre is the same? Is that the question?
Yeah, that the feel is consistent.
Well, that's the entire job, pretty much.
That's it, yeah, welcome. Welcome.
Which I don't mean to like joke and anything, but it's like legitimately that's most of what you spend your time doing. That's what we're all here for, is our job is to think of ways to smooth that out. If you're looking to learn a little bit more about interactive scoring techniques, look up things like horizontal and vertical scoring, techniques like layering, like crossfading, transitions, looping, stingers. I'm throwing out a lot of it with the hopes that you'll basically just Google it afterwards, because it is a rabbit hole, as Chase can tell you.
Bobby, how did you, on something like Avengers, where there's many different moods, right? There's many different characters. There's unique characters and personalities, but then the game needs to sound like the game as well. How did you accomplish that in Avengers?
Yeah, I just had to kind of realize, okay, what
what's happening in this scene, or what's this character doing, and what can this character potentially be doing based on just all these scenarios, fighting, being injured, going into stealth mode, sneaking around, running, and it's like I'm always thinking like, okay, in this scene, what are all the potential things that could happen to this character, and just writing a lot of music and very dense music, and then trusting my audio director to just pare things down, and just being aware that okay, there's going to be stingers, and you write a bunch of stingers. I mean, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. You write a lot of music based on potential scenarios in a game. And so, yeah, I think it's just write a lot of music to take account for what could happen.
Great.
Shoot. Yes, we do that. It really depends. I will say personally, I am a big fan of production music writers, of the people who make the thing, and not so much specifically the track. Because to me, if I find like a really cool track, what I usually think is, oh, it would be great to get that composer to do something custom for us. Which, of course, there are times where we're just going to license the track itself, especially when it comes to potentially marketing material, stuff like that. But when I'm working on something that's custom in-game, 99% of the time, I would rather, like, if I hear your track, I'm going to go, oh, well, you would be a great fit for this part of this game on this spot. Let's call you or call your agent, call your representative, your lawyer, whoever, and see if you're available, if we can work out a rate, if we can work out the timeline, so on and so forth.
I believe we have another question right here.
It's a quick two-parter. Wanted to know how many of you guys were Mongolian throat singers in Doom Eternal?
No, I actually applied for that, but I didn't get it. I used to be in like a heavy metal band.
Oh, no, okay. Well, yeah, nice.
For Doom Eternal.
I don't even know what that means.
Yo, I'm gonna cup this
No,
mic.
Mick Gordon doesn't return my calls anymore.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cup this mic, and everyone's ears are gonna blow out.
That's right. It's a segue into the actual question. I love.
That wasn't the actual question.
Yeah, I know, right? Well,
Hard pass. Next question.
So Mick Gordon obviously did some incredible stuff with Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. And the question's for you composers. What was one of the most interesting instruments that you either created or like a custom sound that you used in a project? Thanks.
I love the
I'm
Doom.
not telling you. No, line. I say,
Well,
well, just go down the line.
Yeah.
Start with Cody.
I mean, I don't know if you're asking specifically about Mick or something that I do, but I love Mick's Doom compressor, which is like 200 dB of gain reduction in either direction. It's like OTT on steroids. Anything to make as many weird sounds as possible. My approach is always trying to be a little unorthodox, and I approach it almost like a sound designer point of view these days. So if you think it's not music, it is. That's kind of my approach. Everything has tonality, and you should treat every sound as a musical instrument, more or less. That's my secret sauce.
I mean, the one thing I did before I Can't Escape Darkness is I have a lot of guitar friends, but through learning guitar friends, they use a lot of pedals. And so I decided to just I'm not Mick Gordon, but I use my voice for those things to kind of be the darkness within that. And then I actually learned an Aztec language and sang it in that form for a specific part in the game.
Nice. I have a 6-string electric cello that gets an aggressive amount of use.
I was in Thailand and I bought this little gourd wind instrument, and it came in handy in Rise of the Tomb Raider whenever someone was shot and killed. I blew into this thing, and it just had this cool, like, creepy effect. So, yeah.
Finding inspiration in unorthodox places, I think, is the key, right? Games are so interesting in world building, and that's part of the job. Whether you're licensing your music or you're creating it straight up, being a part of that world building process is kind of the step one, most important.
And for my contracts, I use a MacBook Pro.
Yeah, I squeeze my cat.
What's your signal chain for your negotiating process?
Yeah. Pages only?
Word only.
Does any more questions out there? Yes.
Hi, I'm from Germany, and we have a big problem the last 10 to 15 years. So ever when you sign a contract with a company there, with a gaming company, it is a contract that's saying you're not registered with a PO. That's period. If you don't do that, you can't work with them. So I'm trying to convince sometimes, hey, there are methods out there nowadays. So my question is, how can I convince them that as a composer, you can also be a PRO and work for games?
I'm struggling to hear with the slap back from the microphone.
Oh.
Yeah. Actually, could you just repeat the question without the microphone and just project?
Okay, yeah, sorry.
That might be easier.
No, it's okay. Sorry about that.
Thank you, sorry.
So in Germany, companies, gaming companies have contracts where you say the composer does not need to be signed with or must not sign with a PRO.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
They do that in Japan too a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So
how can I convince, hey, it is safe? Because it's mainly about the strikes, mainly about the backlashes. In Germany, even like 2 or 3 months ago, again, a person told me like, hey, they have done music when they were studying for like learning platforms. And then Gamer said like, no, he's now registered with Gamer like years later. And now they're forcing to pay the learning platform, 6-digit sums for the mechanical rights because they've sold a lot of CDs. Yeah. And it's shutting down because of that. It creates issues. So how can we convince or find better solutions?
That's a good question. A big part of why I started my company was because of exactly what Mason was alluding to, was that composers who work in-house at game development studios, and this is very specific to regions and performance rights organizations that have statutory rates for specific media platforms. And so if you work in-house at a game developer in a territory that has statutory rates, they basically do not allow you to register with a performing rights organization. Is there a solution to that? Don't work in-house. No, I mean, honestly, I'm not really sure. Jen, I don't know if you don't want to speak about that? Okay. I can say that I've worked on games as an external contractor for, that had internal talent at the developer, and they just were not included on the cue sheet. And so that was to my benefit, because they were not included, but there's not currently, unless the rules of the territory change, which that requires a lot of advocacy. There's no real way around that, because you don't necessarily want to cheat maybe the terms of your agreement with your PRO. But I always encourage people, if you want to have more flexibility, you should register with or move your registration to a PRO in the United States, because you have the most flexibility. I'm represented by ASCAP. It's the best, fist bump, Jen Harmon. Yeah, so I hopefully that answers your question. I don't know if anyone else has anything to share about that. It's very complex.
Mm-hmm. Things generally move really slow when it comes to the PROs or laws or regulations. So, I think that's a good comment to change to, I guess, a U.S. PRO to the extent you can. But the U.S. is probably at the forefront when it comes to video games and potential royalty streams and stuff like that. So, I don't have an answer for your question, but
it's tough.
Yeah,
there just isn't really a great answer, at least not one that I think we on this panel are prepared and qualified to say in this moment.
I can say too, when it comes to the rights I have, I'm just speaking on my own behalf, as a US-based composer with a US PRO, I can do things with my rights that, say, someone in Scandinavia can't. I'm literally dealing with this on a project right now, being and I'll be very generic here, but being inserted into a project to be kind of a legal pass-through almost, where I have the right to sell my moral rights while someone does not. And so I'm being involved in a project to be kind of like this pass-through legal facilitator for another game developer who wants to work with talent in Scandinavia. So it's very delicate because it's important, no matter where you're from. I'm sure this very diverse audience with pubs and labels and composers from around the world, to know exactly what rights you have before you start diving into a new medium, because what you know might apply to linear media could be drastically different when it applies to video games. So I guess education, immersion, for lack of a better word. That's a game pun, sorry. Education's the best thing you can do in understanding what is within the limits of your rights. We'll take one more question. Anyone?
Whichever is the best question.
Any questions? Anyone on stage have a question?
When do we eat?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm getting.
Well, obviously lunch was during this panel, so there's a churro right here on the table. Someone brought a churro.
Hey, that's my churro, sir. Don't you?
I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100. Whoever guesses it gets the cold churro. 57. Yo,
wow.
you got it. You win.
Da, 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 da.
I'll just touch on something that Jen said earlier about making sure your works are registered. It still amazes me that I'll hear a song on a Spotify playlist or something, but that artist is really good. I wonder who publishes them or whatever. And I'll go on the MLC or ASCAP, and the song's not even on there, and it's been released for like a year. It just amazes me. And I think a lot of times, even if you're with an established company, there's a chance that they're dropping the ball on certain registrations. Yeah. So you definitely need, if you own rights or if you write music, you definitely need to be your own advocate and go on there and make sure that whoever you're working with is registering properly, or if you're registering yourself, make sure that you're registering them properly. Because eventually these performance royalties for video games are going to be significant. So
again, devs sell games. Oftentimes they're responsible for rights management. You need to push them hard to do that, because that's our livelihood. Their livelihood is selling games. As soon as you deliver the music, they're like, thanks, bye. And it's really important for all the reasons we've been talking about. If they're the rights manager, it's your responsibility to make them act on theirs. All right. Is that it?
Thank you all so much for joining us.
Should we do an encore? Come back in 5?